Hello and welcome to part 6 of 100 objects that are going to explore and tell the history and values of Summerhill School. The 6th object is a bird. In this case a blackbird, but we'll be looking at birds. Yeah? And I thought I'd just start with a little quote from Neil, as always, and from one of my favourite books, his first book, A Dominie's Log, which was published in 1915 and tells the story of him being the head teacher at Gretna Green School. He walks to the school in the mornings with his pipe, and he tends to sort of finish the pipe off before going into the school, and he even delays starting the school if he wants to finish his pipe and just enjoy the day. This is one morning. He says, "I heard a blackie," which is short for blackbird, "this morning as I went to school. And when I came near to the playground, I heard the girls singing. And I realised that Lenton was come with love to town." So in the book he sort of reminisces about the walking in the countryside with the children, going sketching, looking for beautiful places. And he says later on, discussing nature study, he's quite funny. He's a little cynical because he thinks his nature experience of nature study was a Saturday class where he simply was besotted with one of the other girls in the class. This is when he was young, as a teenager. Anyway, he says, after discussing nature study and the fact that he really wants the children not to learn names, not necessarily to learn how many petals does a flower have, but to actually create ideas and theories. And he loves the Grant Allen books, which are small books for nature study, because he reckons that Grant Allen is a creator of theories and a romancer. And he quotes the fact that of the idea that while tobacco has a broad blade because it doesn't need to care tuppence for the competition of other plants. Anyway, getting back to birds, he says, after discussing nature study, he says, "I would advocate the keeping of animals at school. I would have a rabbit run, a pigeon loft, 1 or 2 dogs and a few cats for the girls. Let a boy keep homers," which is pigeons that are trained as racing pigeons to fly home. "Let a boy keep homers and fly them, and he will observe much. Apart from the observation side of the question, I would advocate a livestock school farm on humanitarian grounds. Every child would acquire a sense of duty to animals. I'm sure all my bairns, my children, would turn out on a Sunday to feed their pets. And what a delightful reward for kindness. Make a boy or girl feeder-in-chief for the week. Incidentally, the study of pigeons and rabbits would conduce to a frank realisation of sex." Now, this is in general agreement with a number of people involved in creating democratic or radical schools, including John Arrowsmith, who ran a village school in Yorkshire, and he advocated children looking after animals. I mean, his whole thing, in fact, Arrowsmith, was that children learn through all the senses, and one way of using all the senses is looking after the animals and then learning about them and caring for them. So that's my quotes from Dominie's Log, and then and that was the blackbird. So let's move on a bit. One of the most powerful images I have of birds in terms of literature is Thomas Hardy's very, very bleak novel, Jude the Obscure. It's one of my favourite novels, in fact. And it starts with the young lad, as a young teenager, standing in the field, and he's being paid to throw rocks and scare the birds by the farmer. And he thinks about it, and he just watches the birds instead of scaring them, because one, he's not paid very much, and two, he's more in sympathy with the birds that he's meant to scare away. The birds are eating the seeds that the farmers put down. And on the horizon, he sees the glow of the city of Cambridge, and his aspiration, of course, as a young, impoverished boy. I mean, he shouldn't have this aspiration in the society he's brought up in, but he aspires to go to this university town, to the yellow halo on the horizon. And I think what a really powerful image that this boy has in terms of his understanding of nature and his empathy for the birds, and yet the way he's brought up to be not what he wants to love, which is knowledge and craft and creating things and learning things that no one will let him do in the end. Anyway, back to birds at Summerhill's. Summerhill's always had lots of birds. In fact, they had chickens. I think they, I don't know how long they've had chickens, but I know that the chickens were there a long time. When I arrived, I think they were called Ina's chickens, and they would just wander around the school, sort of pecking at and searching for food, and they would have a hutch for overnight. Thanks. And then our French teacher, Pascal, she took responsibility for them after died, and the children would collect eggs and things, and it was wonderful just to see the chickens around. And then the students would have eggs, ducks' eggs, that they would get from a farmer, and they would incubate them in the science lab, and then raise the ducklings and learn about ducklings and measure how quickly they grew and just and care for them. And then we had, in terms of the SAN, which is the youngest kids, these children from about 6 to 10, they were involved again with a wonderful French teacher who then became their houseparent, involved in the RSPB annual bird count, which is like a week or fortnight where children and people throughout the country are encouraged to watch birds, or watch from a window for like an hour, and then they record using an official sheet the birds that they see from the window. And of course there were bird tables in Summerhill, and there was a bird table behind where the young children lived, so that you could see the birds from the kitchen window. And as it was in the kitchen, some of the children would have to climb up onto the kitchen surfaces to look through the window. And one of these boys recently was a very young boy, I think he was 5, and he got really into Angry Birds, which is a game with angry birds and pigs. And it became an animated film, and you could buy them like this, yeah, but they were a bit more colourful, and each bird has a character, and basically you in the game you fire them at the pigs. And the idea is it's not a particularly ethical game, but the idea is the pigs are out to sort of destroy the birds are protecting themselves. And this boy had a whole collection of these, and he was really into them, and he got really into the RSPB sort of observation of the birds and finding out what birds were in Summerhill and things. And then I would go down to their where they lived, and at bedtime I brought some apps on my phone which had bird songs, and we had competitions with cards. They had to guess what bird song was playing, and they had to name the bird on the card and things. So we did that for a few nights just before their bedtime, which was really, really nice. And we put a display up in their corridor so that they could see what birds they'd seen, and see the different birds that they may not have actually spotted yet. And then I put a display in the dining room to show the whole school what the children were doing with birds and what birds they could look for. And this, which is exciting to share your enthusiasm. And this is one of the things about democratic schools in Summerhill, is that a lot of the learning is about sharing enthusiasm. It's not about the teacher with the authority sort of saying, I'm the expert, and and I'm trained to teach you. Yeah, it's about sharing the love of something and learning through that. There was, there's a very famous teacher from a democratic school, Dartington, and his name was David Lack, And this was his favourite bird when he was teaching at Dartington, and he worked with the students, and he got the students to, well, he was sort of amateur naturalist and biologist at the time. He became a professional later, and he started studying the robins, and he got the children to help him, and they observed the robins, and they put rings on their feet so they could identify the robins, and he studied their behaviour for many years, and as did the children with him. But I mean, he did it during the holidays as well, and he published the most authoritative book on robins. He changed the whole way we saw robins through this study that started with his enthusiasm as a science teacher at Dartington School, sharing his love of robins with the children. Now, as well as the chickens and the ducks and Class 1 or the SAN, we have Zoe Redhead is who's the principal of the school. She has a fantastic interest in enthusiasm for birds, and she can recognise them from their bird songs and things. So she's wonderful to go for walks with, and she would hold regular walks where she invites the children and staff to join her to listen to the bird song in the morning, the dawn chorus, or to go to local bird reserve and just go bird watching and things. And in fact, the staff we'd all go for walks where we to listen to the birds, or just and to see what we could spot. But the thing about Summerhill, in fact, is, and this is one of the issues we had with our inspection, is that we learn so much by being outside, and the children can be outside every day, all day. Yeah, and we had sort of 12 acres of land, of which there's a lot of woods. So just to be in the woods watching the birds and listening to them, I mean, what more could you want? Okay, thank you very much indeed.